Welcome back to Sida Logic, that is tech made easy. So in this video we will be talking about the most asked AWS interview questions, and these questions can be come up in your next AWS cloud engineer interview or DevOps engineer interview. So it's going to be a very helpful video. Just a small request, so if you know the answer, I will first showing you will show the question. If you know the answer to that question, you can pause the video here, think about the answer, and then can forward it. Okay, just try to think by yourself first, and then you can see the answer. So yeah, without wasting any time, let's directly jump into it. Let's directly jump into our first question. So here we go. Question number 1. A distributed application that processes huge amounts of data across various EC2 instances. The application is designed to recover gracefully from EC2 instance failure. How will you accomplish this in a cost-effective manner? So if you look at the question here, it is asking us that we have an application that is hosted on EC2 instances, means a multiple EC2 instances, and it is designed to recover from gracefully from EC2 instance failure, means the application, if somehow gets interrupted in between, that can recover on its own. So how I can choose a particular instance type by keeping the cost effectiveness in manner. So yep, you can pause the video here if you know the answer. Think about it, and yep, we're gonna discuss it in few seconds. So yep, let's discuss the answer to this question. So first of all, as you know that there are multiple types of EC2 instances, right? We have on-demand instance, we have reserve instances, and we have the spot instances, right? So now you have to choose among the three, which in terms by keeping which is more cost effective in your mind. And you know that on-demand and reserve instances will not be an ideal choice. Why? Because they are more expensive as compared to your spot instances, because you don't have, in case of spot instances, they can be interrupted in between. That's why they give us, AWS give us more discount for using the spot instances. So therefore choosing the on-demand and reserve instances will not gonna help us because it will cost us more. Therefore we will be opting for spot instances because of its cost effectiveness and no long-term commitments. Okay, that's it. That's the answer for this particular question. Cool, let's discuss our next question then. A content management system running on EC2 instance is approaching 100% CPU utilization. So how will you reduce the load on the EC2 instance? So in this case, what they're trying to say is that we have an EC2 instance and that is reaching 100% CPU utilization. Means traffic is coming on my website, that website is hosted on EC2, and for that EC2 my CPU is reaching 100%. So what are those ways by which I can reduce the load on my EC2 instance? So you need to think in terms of what AWS services that can help us to reduce the load on this, right? That can help us to distribute the load among the instances. You need to think from that perspective in this particular questions, right? Always remember that when the question is talking about reducing the load, so you need to keep certain AWS services in mind that can help us in that particular scenario. So yeah, you can pause the video here, you can think about the answer, and yeah, if we'll discuss it now. So let's go to the answer and let's see. So first of all, we need to make sure that EC2 instance is behind an auto-scaling group, correct? Because if there is going to be a single instance only and that instance is reaching 100% CPU, then yeah, my website can be down. My website can be crashed because a single instance can handle only a certain amount of user requests. So in that case, first of all, I need to make sure that my EC2 instance is behind an auto-scaling group, and then to distribute the load, to reduce the load from my EC2 instance, I need to distribute the traffic among multiple instances. Therefore, the second step that I need to do is to attach a load balancer to my auto scaling group to effectively distribute the traffic among multiple instances. Okay, so whenever your interviewer is talking about distributing the load, reducing the load, keep load balancer and auto scaling in mind. Okay, that is where auto scaling plus load balancing can help us to reduce the load as well as to increase my application's availability. All right, cool. Let's go to our next question now. So question number 3 is, imagine that you have an AWS application that requires 24/7 availability and can be down only for a maximum of 50 minutes. How will you ensure that the database hosted on your EBS volume is backed up? So in this case, let's say we have an EC2 instance and we have an, let's say, GP2 type EBS volume, and we have hosted a database on my EC2 instance, and all the data is stored on my EBS volume, and it is saying that it can be down for a maximum of 15 minutes. So how can I make sure that the database is hosted on my EBS volume is backed up? So basically we need to think of a way that in what way I can make sure that my the data on my EBS volume can be backed up automatically, right? Because we don't want any manual interventions while taking the backup. We don't want anyone who, to take login in at a specific time and take the backup manually. We want to automate this process. So you need to think from that perspective what applications, like what AWS services can help us to automate this particular process, right? So you can again pause the video, you can think of your answer, and then you can see if your answer matches with the what I have think in this particular case or not. All right, so let's discuss it. So we know that like automatic backups are the key processes as they work in the background without requiring the manual intervention, as we discussed, right? So the best way is to prepare a timely backup of the EBS of the EC2 instance, and the EBS snapshot should be stored on S3 bucket and can be used to recover the database in case of any failure or downtime, right? So this is the ideal way of taking the backup. We need to make sure that the EBS snapshot, the snapshots we are taking of our EBS volume, those snapshots are storing on my S3 bucket. And which AWS service can help me to automate this process? We have the AWS database data lifecycle manager. Okay, with the help of AWS data lifecycle manager, we can automate the EBS snapshots. We can define a time, the date, and the frequency at which we want to take the snapshot of my EBS volume. So we can define a lifecycle policy in my AWS data lifecycle manager, which will help us to automate this process. Okay, so yep, so that's the answer for this particular question. Always remember that when they are talking about the database backup, always think from the how you can automate the entire process, right? So in this case, database lifecycle manager can help us to automate this. And if the same question is talking about, well, let's say the database is hosted on RDS. In case of RDS, you do not need AWS data lifecycle manager, because in RDS gives us the functionality to define to define a particular time, the frequency at which I can automate my database backup process. It has inbuilt functionality in case of RDS. In case of EBS, you can use data lifecycle manager. All right, so now let's move to our last question for this particular part 1. What is the difference between horizontal and vertical scaling in AWS? Okay, so this is the last question of this particular part 1, and this is one of the most asked interview questions in AWS cloud engineer interviews, DevOps engineer interviews, SRE roles, and so on. So understanding the difference between vertical and horizontal scaling is very important. So first of all, what happens in vertical scaling is more power is added to the existing machine. In contrast, whereas in horizontal scaling, instead of adding more power to the existing machine, we add multiple machines to such that the load can be distributed among the multiple machines, and the workload can be processed and can be shared among the multiple devices. That's the main difference. So in vertical scaling, we are just increasing. Let's discuss in case of EC2. So in case of EC2, let's say we are using a T2 dot medium instance type, and can handle, let's say, 300 requests per second only. So in case of vertical scaling, what I'll do is, let's say users increase drastically. So instead of what I'll do is simply changing my EC2 instance type from T2 medium to, let's say, T2.2x large, which can handle up to 800 requests per second, right? So we don't need to configure auto scaling in this case. We are just simply manually changing the instance type for my machine. Whereas in horizontal scaling, if we talk about horizontal scaling, that means we are adding more machines, and we can utilize services like AWS Autoscaling, which will automatically add the EC2 instances by, let's say, when a particular threshold is reached based on, let's say, a CPU utilization or so on. So that comes in terms of horizontal autoscaling. Let's take an example. So let's say when the users are up to 100, an EC2 instance alone is not enough to run the entire application on the database until the traffic ramps up. So under such circumstances, when the traffic ramps up, it is better to scale vertically by increasing the capacity of the EC2 instance to meet the increasing demand. So AWS support instance up to 128 virtual core and 488 GB of RAM. So as we discussed, let's say a particular instance type can handle only 100 users. So now instead of adding more machines, we can simply increase the instance type for the TC2. Now let's say when the users for application grow, let's say from thousands or more, vertical scaling cannot handle the request. So now in this case, we can utilize horizontal scaling by implementing AWS Autoscaling, which will automatically add the instances, and the traffic can be distributed by implementing a load balancer with my auto scaling, right? So that the traffic will be distributed among all the instances which are a part of my auto scaling group. All right, so that's it. I hope this makes sense. If you have any doubt, guys, please ask me in the comment section, and it's a humble request, please guys subscribe to the channel. I will be releasing more interview parts every week, so please subscribe to the channel, and more videos are on the way. And yes, if press the bell icon, comment and share this video as much as you can. Thank you so much guys for watching this video. Please let me know if you have any other doubts in the comment section, and yeah, have a great day.